Provincial, and he is not here with us today. He was supposed to come in first before me. I thought I'll start by reminding everyone of the timetable that we are working with, which has been the binding document on all the activities that we have delivered since the proclamation of the election by the National Minister Koktam on the 20th of September this year. Someone told me this was going to work, and surprise, surprise, it is not. Our election timetable started with the proclamation of the results on the 20th of September, and that was a trigger date for all the activities that we conducted. Ordinarily, to run an election, you need a minimum of 86 days between the days the election is proclaimed until the date you hold an election. We all are aware of everything that took place before the election date was proclaimed, and as a result, we had to work with a timetable that was very truncated, which gave us 42 days in terms of the usual 86. What that meant is that an activity that we ordinarily have a week to deliver, we had to deliver in a day. If you look at the slide that is up now, on the 20th we proclaimed, the minister proclaimed the election date, and the Electoral Commission had to close the voters' roll at midnight on the 20th of September. On the very same day, we had to avail the voters' roll for inspection in case anyone wanted to object to anyone that was appearing on any segment of the voters' roll. We had to open candidate nomination on the same day. We have to open application for special votes, something that in an ordinary timetable, all those 5 activities, they are a week apart. We held our registration weekend on the 18th and the 19th of September. Normally we have 2 weeks to clean up the voters' roll before we go into an election. This time around we had 1 day. We had a registration weekend 18-19. On the 20th, the voters' roll closed. On the 21st, the very next day, candidate nomination closed. Within 5 days of that, we had to certify the candidates that were going to contest these elections, because the most critical task of them all is the printing of the ballots. And unless you have certified the candidate list and concluded all the candidate nomination processes, we are not able to start the ballot printing. So that's how we started off this election. Once we finished the certification of candidates, we issue them with the certificates that allow them access to all our voting stations. And then within a few days of that, we have to close application for special votes, because we needed to finish the provisioning for the special vote event to make sure that we have sufficient documents to administer special votes. I'll quickly gonna go through KZN in numbers just to give you an indication of the scope of an election in this province, probably vis-a-vis other provinces in the country. The voters' roll that we went into this election with, which was the certified voters' roll for this election, had, sorry, this is very sensitive, had 5,447,815 voters in KwaZulu-Natal. That makes up almost 21% of the total voters' roll in the country. We are only second after Gauteng as the most populous province on the voters' roll. After us is the Eastern Cape, but that's basically the scope of the elections in this province. The bottom graph just shows you the split between male and female on the voters' roll, which is always skewed in favor of the females. I do hope political parties, that the representation of political parties as well in our municipalities will be reflective of the higher percentage of women in our voters' roll in this country. In terms of voting stations, this is the scope of the elections in this province vis-a-vis other provinces. We are occupying 21% of the total voting stations that we have in the country. We have over 23,000 and 4,940 in KwaZulu-Natal. In terms of parties that were contesting elections in KwaZulu-Natal, we had 78 political parties, inclusive of parties that were only contesting part of the province and not necessarily the entire province. Only 5 of the political parties contested every ward, every municipality in this province, and those are the Abantu Batho Congress, African National Congress, Democratic Alliance, Economic Freedom Fighters, and Inkatha Freedom Party. Others you'll find even your Ratepayers Association contesting elections in some of the municipalities, but these are the only 5 that contested the whole of KwaZulu-Natal. Candidate nomination overview, we saw a record number of candidates that were contesting elections in this province. This is a comparative analysis from the 2011 local government elections. We didn't want to go beyond that because the nature of the voters' roll that we use now started taking shape in 2011. If you look at 2011, we had 28 political parties. This time we had 78. Wards themselves, we had 828 wards. This time we were working on 901 wards. Ward candidates, we started off with just over 5,000. We had 14,000 this time around contesting in these elections. PR candidates, just over 4,000 in 2011. We were sitting at just over 7,000 this time around. Independent candidates, I think this is where we saw the biggest jump. We started off with 107 in 2011. We had 334 independents that were contesting KZN this time around. Total number of candidates, if you look at 2011, just over 10,000, 2016, still within the 10,000 range, and it doubled up in this election. This is the comparison of seats versus candidates that were contesting these elections. For ward candidates, we had 901 seats that were up for grabs. We had 14,092 candidates that were contesting, and we have 13,191 candidates that were not so lucky. On the PR side, both in terms of the local municipality as well as district municipalities, we had a total of 994 seats that were up for grabs. We had 7,358 candidates, and we are going to have 6,364 candidates that are not going to be happy. So that's the total of the seats that we have against the candidates that were contesting, and the variance is 19,555. What has been good so far since Monday is that there is a general level of acceptance of the results, particularly at what level. We do have incidents where we have had to relook at the results in some of the wards, but fortunately we have a party liaison committee where there is anything that doesn't make sense in the results, we are able to reconcile those results together until they make sense for all of us. I am not sure whether our presiding officer gets tired at 2 in the morning when they start recording the reconciliation portion of the result slip, where you look at the ballot papers issued, ballot papers that are valid, disputed ballots, cancelled ballots, spoiled ballots. Something happens during that reconciliation. But fortunately, the reconciliation page doesn't necessarily affect the votes received by a political party. If anything like that happens, we have a mechanism of reconciling results with political parties. Ballot papers. We had a total of 955 unique ballot papers that we needed to print. This is in comparison with national and provincial elections, where we simply have 2 unique ballots in the province, the national and the provincial ballots. This time we had 955 total ballots, which accounts for the metro, the 43 local municipalities, as well as the 10 district councils that we have in the province. Our provisioning strategy is that we provide 100% to the number of people that are on the certified segment of the voters' roll for that municipality, ward, or voting districts. But for the voting district consignment, we further round it off to the nearest 100. So we plan for 100% turnout, but we know we hardly ever get 100% turnout. The bottom breakdown just indicates the number of ballots that were printed vis-a-vis the number of people certified on the voters' roll for that particular election. On the ward by-elections, we had the voters' roll, as already indicated, of 5.4 million in the province, but we printed 5,785,000 ballots. 5,785,000 ballots, which made provision for a 6% buffer over and above the 100% provisioning. On the PR ballots for local municipalities, we still have the same numbers of people on the certified voters' roll, but we printed again 5.7 million to make way for the buffer. The PR district ballot, the voters' roll there is reduced, because we have one region in Metro that doesn't belong to any district council. So the certified voters' roll for the PR ballot in the province was 3.5 million, and we printed 3.8 million, and we had a buffer of 8%. On the Metro ballots, Metro only has 2 ballots because they don't have a third one, which is for the district council. We had 1.9 million 1,908,000 on the voters' roll for the Metro alone, and we printed 1,965,000, which made provision for a 3% buffer. The reason I'm putting this slide is that we want to dispel the notion that we ran out of ballot papers. What could have happened is the logistical plan was not tight enough in eThekwini, because we only had experienced that in the outer west region of eThekwini, in Ward 1 and Ward 4. What could have happened there is that when they were splitting their ballot books to create consignments per ward and per voting station, something didn't go well with the numbers. But fortunately, the ward ballot was not affected. It's the PR ballot that was affected, and we're able to move them from the neighboring wards in the outer west region of Pinetown. But we managed to deal with that situation pretty quickly when we became aware of it. This is the pass that I thought I needed to do now, because if I don't do it now, once we do that after the results, no one will be interested. I need to acknowledge the role that is played by the various state departments in this province in particular. In terms of the Constitution, all state entities have got to support the Electoral Commission in the delivery of elections, particularly in terms of the infrastructure required to deliver the elections. I would like to acknowledge the Provincial Local Government Steering Committee, which comprises of the IEC, COCTA, SSA, as well as SALCA. This is a structure that has been operational since 2 years ago, and is a structure that, where we look at, COCTA was identified as a lead agency in government in this province to consider all the infrastructure that we need to run elections and coordinate ensuring that all the other government departments make sure that the facilities that belong to them are ready for us to use during elections. So whilst you see COCTA, but COCTA here is a lead agency on behalf of all the government departments in this province, province, they liaise with the Department of Transport in terms of roads. If the Department of Transport says we do not have sufficient budget, they will go to COGTA, and COGTA will have to try and source funds within government that could be redirected into making sure that the roads are rehabilitated in time for the elections. That's specifically the access roads. One of the task teams of this structure is the voting station infrastructure task team, where the members are a little bit wider. It still involves IEC, COGTA, and municipalities at district level, but it also involved the specific government departments that have something to do with the infrastructure in voting stations. That's the Department of Transport, Department of Education, Department of Health, ESCOM, SALGA, and ICASA. ICASA is representing the network cell phone providers. They are able to work with them and ascertain that they are able to piggyback on each other's infrastructure to try and improve connectivity in our voting stations. We also have the outreach and communication task team, which is used to design outreach material that is used by the various state entities to assist the IEC to educate on the election framework and just doing voter education. One of the biggest programs that was run by this team was driven by the Speaker of the Provincial Legislature, where we did roadshows in different towns in the province, educating people, particularly in preparation for the registration weekend, and educating who needs to change their registration details in going into these elections, because there are people who still believe that in 2019, national and provincial elections, people could pretty much show up anywhere, provided they were on the certified segment of the voters' roll. We had to educate that for local government elections, you need to register in the ward where you ordinarily reside. And that's one of the biggest programs that we ran. In terms of election logistics, we worked pretty much mainly with municipalities and government departments. That is in terms of storage facilities that we needed to secure in each one of the 44 municipalities in the province, and as well as the distribution of the election material into voting stations from the municipal level storage facility. The SAPS played their part in securing the elections, but over and above that, they needed to escort our area managers that were carrying our sensitive materials into the voting stations. We also had in this province for the past year been participating in the provincial joint operations in the province that brings together all the security structures, where we were looking at the issues of stability in the province and the categorization of voting stations in terms of their risk profile. We were working very closely with the SAPS for the whole year building up into the election day, where they were able to deploy the members in line with the risk profile of the area where they were going to be working. I have already mentioned the Party Liaison Committee. This is the structure that's unique to South Africa, where we have, whether we have elections or no elections, we have a structure representative of all the political parties that would have attained seat in that sphere of government, whether it's national, provincial, or local, to discuss issues around elections that start as far back as when we draw the voting district boundaries, when we break down the wards into voting districts, so that we are able to have an administrative unit that we work with when we plan our operations. So the Party Liaison Committee is not only activated for elections. We may meet more frequent around elections, but we meet all the time, whether we are recruiting staff to vet the staff that are presiding officers in our stations. We do not employ them until the Party Liaison Committee in every municipality has confirmed that the presiding officer or deputy that is going to man our voting station does not hold office in a political party and have not held office in the past 5 years, because in front of the public, the perception is that that person is still an official of the party. We make room for a 5-year window period before we can bring them on board, and we do not confirm them until the political parties in that municipality have accepted them. We also screen our staff, the presiding officers and their deputies, for records of serious offenses offenses, and that's where the SSA comes in terms of that, because we cannot have somebody with questionable integrity in the community presiding over an election in any community. The other vetting that we do for our staff, we run our candidate nomination system against the electoral staff system, so that we don't have someone who has decided to be a candidate in this election still working as an electoral officer at any level of the commission. Lastly, on outreach and voter education, I want to I've missed the Provincial Multi-Party Political Intervention Committee. Whilst the PLC focuses on issues around operations, the Multi-Party Political Intervention Committee looks at issues of a political nature that may impact negatively on the integrity of the election in any community. It's the same political parties that sit in the Party Liaison Committee, but this is the committee that where we think there's something that has been reported against a political party, the other opportunity to engage that political party and advise them on an intervention that will help develop an environment that is conducive to holding free and fair elections in that community. MEC Peggy Nkonyeni co-chairs that multi-party political intervention committee in her portfolio as the MEC for community safety and liaison in this province. We've been co-chairing that committee together for the past year. Lastly, outreach and voter education. We worked, I've already indicated, our biggest program, which was a roadshow in all the different towns, headed by the Speaker of the Legislature with our outreach staff in the Commission, where they provided the resources that we needed to run the roadshow. Municipalities, we did ward-based voter education programs with the municipalities' special programs, whether it's a youth desk or the disability desk, and then the civil society organizations, which includes the NGOs, faith-based organizations, unions, and traditional authorities, where we did voter education. But we have a very organized civil society in this province, and organizations such as the KwaZulu-Natal Christian Council, the Corner Council of Churches, and other associated agencies, where they've clustered themselves into various groups that do voter education, they do election observation, and they do election-related violence monitoring. These are all the different entities in the province that play a role in running these elections. Before I hand over to a colleague from my office who is going to talk to the results, which is something that everyone is interested in, I would like to use this opportunity to request the staff of the Electoral Commission to stand, so that you can understand or know the faces of the people that run elections in this province. It's not me, rest assured. It's the staff of the Electoral Commission. They are very shy, but can the provincial office staff stand? Thank you very much, colleagues. You can sleep today. Everyone is allowed to go to sleep. We are ready to release the results, but unfortunately tomorrow is a working day, because we still need to deal with the Section 65 objections that are coming through, but today just sleep. We will start tomorrow morning and deal with the objections, so that we are ready as the Commission to release the official results through the Government Gazette on the 8th of November. Colleagues and friends, thank you very much. I forgot to introduce